derived from increasing CO in the atmosphere is going to be offset by more extreme weather. When plants are growing under higher levels of CO, weeds, higher levels of CO2, they become more difficult to control with herbicides. Pollen for bees has 30% less protein when CO2 is raised. And the big one is human nutrition. With increasing CO2 in the atmosphere, there'll be less protein, vitamins, and minerals in many of our major staple crops like rice and wheat. B vitamins and rice will decline about 30% by mid-century. And now let's add smoke. We don't think about it, but smoke affects animals that are grazing, and they can't escape. It has serious health effects on them. Veggies, well, things look a little better. All of these compounds are increasing: fructose, glucose, antioxidant capacity. And since one of my daughters really wants me to eat more kale, and of course, as a good father, I repel her comments or I disagree with her. Anyway, actually, I love kale, but kale may taste better in the future because of climate change, increasing CO2. Changes in water, where it falls, how it falls, when it falls, and what form it falls is changing. We're getting more precipitation whiplash. Downpours, then droughts. California was in a mega drought for 20 years. Now it's back to normal. However, suspicion or scientists are starting to suggest it's going to go back into another drought. Italy, a few years ago, had 2 years of drought, followed by a year of intense rain, damaged by about 5,000 farms. And yeah, when it gets warmer, ice melts. And this is a photograph of blueberry production in Peru. The buildings in the forefront are for the workers, but you can see the vast fields of blueberry that go off to the horizon. The warming atmosphere has increased the amount of summer meltwater coming from the glaciers at higher altitudes and the ice cap. Agriculture has expanded. Unfortunately, prediction now is that ice will be gone in less than 20 years. Where it falls. On the left, this is the drought monitor from 2021. This was when California West was still in the mega drought. But more or less here's just recently, February 11th, things are much better. But the Los Angeles fires, see the red, they're still in an extreme drought. And as I watch these drought monitors day to day, that drought is expanding. The rest of the country, we're doing more or less okay. Again, the whiplash. Looking to the end of the century, wet areas will get wetter, dry areas drier. If you look at the Northeast United States, it's blue. We'll get more annual precipitation in the future than we have today. We're already ahead by about 5 inches. The rest of the country is going to get dry. Obviously, this has serious implications for food production. Even hail in some regions is getting larger because of climate change, and hail and apple trees and apples are not a good mix. The oceans, phytoplankton, in some area that, by the way, the basis of the food chain in the oceans are in decline in some areas because of stratification of the ocean layers. The warming upper layer is becoming stratified and inhibits the upwelling of nutrients deep in the ocean to feed and provide nutrients to the phytoplankton. They're in decline. By the way, they also produce half the oxygen that we require. Other things are happening. I'm sure you're aware of acidification of the ocean affecting creatures that have shells. These are pollock, but the young pollock feed on the underside of ice. They feed on algae on the underside of ice, but ice is retreating. Snow crabs, delicious. 10 billion snow crabs died within the last several years because the waters in the Bering Sea warmed up, their metabolism kicked in, got faster, They simply ran out of food and they starved to death. Stories to wake people up. Temperatures, just going to focus on peaches. Winters are warming twice as fast as summers. Most fruit trees, all nut trees, require a winter chill. It has to be cold enough for a certain number of hours. If it's too warm and that doesn't happen, they don't bear fruit or nuts. So in 2017 and in 2024, Georgia had very few peaches because the preceding winter was too warm. It had this affected crops in California, but in the middle I have citrus, another change. 10 years ago, Georgia had 5,000 citrus trees. Now they have 500,000. Shift in agriculture. A lot going on with temperature. You think it's warming, but it's not simple. Midwest wheat crop is likely to be devastated by a heat wave every 6 years. It used to be every 100 years. This is a paper mostly about human migration. And you can see today where it's more or less suitable for us to exist in a lot of crops. 2070, that entire zone moves north along with crops. The implications of this, one, from migration are just hard to absorb, but crops are going to be moving northward as well. And if you get to this paper, you can look up the county you live in, and it'll tell you what it's going to be like in the years 2040 to 2060. And if we just look at the second row, Pinal County, Arizona, it's going to get hotter, more humid, yields are going to be affected. The bigger the number, the greater the damage. Sea level rise, no chance. But so I added where I live, Tompkins County, New York. I'm not moving. The numbers are really small. Things are going to be pretty good here with climate change. And even getting food to the table is getting complicated. The dry riverbed is the Mississippi. For the last 3 falls, right when the Midwest is harvesting grains, drought has resulted in a dry Mississippi, so the barges have a really difficult time moving grain. The grain has to be moved by other means. The cost of that is astronomical. More or less, if you want to think of it on the positive side, the image to the right is the ice cap, the Arctic ice, in September when it's at its lowest extent because of, quote, the warmer summers. It should actually be out by that yellow line, but because everything is warming, there's less and less ice. The space between that yellow line and the ice white is about 750,000 square miles, which is now absorbing warmth, melting more ice, you get it. But when it comes to moving food, this will open up transport from Northern Asia to Northern Europe and reduce the time of transport by about 40%. More stories to tell. So let's just look at a menu. Again, the stories to tell are nearly unlimited. It's hard to find something that isn't changing. This may not be the appropriate example to use with your class, but that is the ultimate Bloody Mary. The little thing on the top of the bun is breaded okra. The meat is venison and pork, I believe. There's an egg, corn, celery, obviously tomato juice. But look on the left. Everything listed there is changing, and there's a story to tell. Chickens raised out of doors under higher temperatures, the eggshells are thinner. It's a peach vodka, by the way, produced in Georgia. Story about peaches. Okra, now grown in Wisconsin, where I grew up, unheard of before. Shrimp populations are moving. Spices are changing, coming from India. Stories to tell. Salad, avocados, most from Mexico. Those in California are probably going to be out of business in the next 15 years because of higher temperatures. Tomatoes get sweeter, onions more pungent. The lettuce production will expand because of warming winters in the US. Stories to tell. Upper left, asparagus is a winter crop. So if winter's warm, It's going to be a little more challenging to grow asparagus. Fish populations are shifting such that they stay where the temperature of the oceans are better. Fowl, chickens, probably okay. Most are reared in controlled atmospheric conditions, more or less. Mushrooms, I always was challenged to find something about mushrooms, but think of out-of-door mushrooms. It's drier and hotter. So wild mushroom populations are changing. The burger, the sesame seeds on the top of that burger, most of sesame, well, 40% of the sesame we use comes from Tanzania. Sesame loves hot, dry conditions. It's actually expanding in production. I mentioned tomatoes, so every time I see a dairy product, I just say, yep, cows give less milk. Hot cows give less milk. I talked about beef and smoke, but cost of beef has gone up because grazing lands have been decimated by drought, and obviously production of some of the forages they need has also been challenged by drought. Spices, all the bread products, nutritional quality of rice. The chips up there are fish and chips from the UK a couple of years ago. They were shorter by ½ inch because that summer was really dry, and people wondered, why are chips shorter? Coffee, I'm not going to talk about. Chocolate, I think you're aware of. Vanilla from Madagascar, natural vanilla. 99% of the vanilla we consume is artificial. Lots of stories to tell. And it doesn't stop with food. Cosmetics are changing, and it's an amazing story. Pet food, just like ours. Textiles, medicinal herbs, you name it. It's all changing. More stories to tell. We did a survey a few years ago to see if people were actually concerned about climate change effect on food choices. 86% of Democrats said yes, 61% of the Republicans said yes. I was surprised. Are you willing to pay more for something grown with climate-friendly practices? Same results. Do you want to learn more? More about the same thing. But then you ask the standard question, is climate change a crisis? The political divide sets in. We talk about climate change, or excuse me, food a lot, but not climate change. How can we bring these conversations together? Also ask this question, what's the first word that comes to mind when you think about the effects of climate change on food? It's on people's minds. It's something we can tap. So back to confronting climate change. All these beautiful synonyms, and we could also be depressed, overwhelmed, ignored, deny. This story includes what's being done. Worldwide, there's something called climate smart farming that is helping farmers worldwide continue to produce under these conditions. Food and beverage businesses are looking at their supply chains, are looking at alternative ingredients. That beer toast is made from waste bread in the UK. Really creative way. Science is really important more than ever, especially breeding for new varieties, soil health, etc. But I'm just going to jump right to this. It's an opportunity to connect science with food. Gene editing is precise. That's a piano keyboard with 32,000 keys, and one is being removed. That's like taking one gene out of the genome of the corn plant. And there's no substantiated evidence that foods from genetically engineered crops are any less safe than those produced using non-genetically engineered methods. What can we all do? This is where we sort of help the student understand what they can do. Talk about it. It's important. It's food. Become climate change literate. Focus on what matters. There's a lot of things we can do that don't matter. Focus on what you can continue to recycle. Bear in mind, in the big picture, it's not helping a lot, but don't stop. Get involved, find what you're best at. Be the first. Peer pressure works. So when it comes to talking about it, we created a storytelling cookbook. You can use this at a dinner, you can use it wherever you want, but it's basically, storytelling is so powerful. It's such an extraordinary way to share knowledge. So we created this cookbook, which is also used in the class to say the least. And it has, well, it has lots of ideas. It's a 18-page document. Can't go into it all, but there's the contents, why we did it, and how it can be useful. And here's the ingredients to storytelling. Is it about a conflict? Is it a point of view? Can you use humor? What's your point? What's the beginning? What's the end? And students have really enjoyed this because we'll just start to tell stories randomly in the classroom, and it's fun. The other thing that is really fun is role playing. Okay, on the left, that's a climate change denier or doubter. On the right, no, yeah, on the right, that's a believer. And in the class, I had a student who was a denier, just said, my golly, my dad didn't believe in it, and nor do I. And the one who was trying to convince him climate change is real just said, it's like talking to a wall. And somebody else who was playing the role of a denier just said, I could say anything. I could just say anything. And that really scared me. So we've also had some, I won't go into it, but I laughed so hard when a family of us, we created a family and got into a discussion about food and climate change. And we were laughing so hard, I'll never forget it. It was really fun. But the point in the end was, even within a family, it's not an easy topic to talk about. I also try to help students find the greater purpose, not just a 9-to-5 job, but something bigger than that. And climate change, if you're working on climate change, it's a greater purpose, and help them find their gift, which lies in the place where your values, passions, and strengths meet. And we've talked about this. Another piece to this class. Back to food. It's a common ground. What if chefs, consumers, restaurant owners, food industry, food media, producers joined forces and all told this story? There's no villains here. We need each other. And what if we created a great awakening? A much deeper state of awareness and need for action on climate change using food. We need to eat, we need to act quickly, really fast, and at scale. We eat every day, multiple times. Is it a dream? Why not dream? Can we create a social movement around using the power of food? And here's some quotes. This is from the first course I taught about the power of food. With food as a medium, it's easier to establish connections that will break through the political veil surrounding climate change. Jonathan graduated in 23. I believe that connecting with others over food, either literally or through conversation about food, could help us see past differences and unite in the fight to save not only food, but our planet too. Eve, 23. The might of food lies in its subtlety, a silent force with profound cultural and personal nuances. These nuances form a sturdy foundation, making topics like climate change more palatable and comprehensible to diverse audiences. Some of their projects. On the left was a student whose father grew coffee in Honduras. And on the left are all the bad words associated with climate change. On the right are the good words. And yes, that's a coffee bean. On the right, an art student. Across the top, those are 2 bottles of beer. And inside each bottle are all the details of what's happening to beer because of climate change. But across the top, crack a cold one while you can. This student wrote a poem about making a meal in the kitchen. And just here's part of it. From potatoes to rice, grain so grand, their future trembles in an uncertain land. Yes, amidst the challenges, hope that prevails in the hearts of those who refuse to fail. So let food inspire, let flavor ignite, a passion for change, a relentless fight. For in the kitchen stance, where dreams take flight, lies the power to heal, to protect, to unite. This student actually brought in all the ingredients for her mother's favorite salad, made that salad, and with each ingredient told a story of what's happening to it, and the class ate that salad. I asked students at the beginning of the class, in one word, how do you feel about your future given climate change? And also asked the same at the end of the class. And these are paired. The same student said cynical, ambivalent at the beginning, and hopeful at the end of the class. And just walked down from there's limited to hopeful, frustrated, still irritated, uncertain, frightened. That student wasn't aware of climate change. Small to bigger, hot to motivated, stuck, motivated, terrified, prepared, frustrated, empowered. They got it. They learned the power of food. They could talk to it. They've had a tool now they could use in the fight of climate change. What about climate change meals? And pizza is great. I've actually done 2 of these now with students at Cornell. We just talk about, give a little overview of what's happening, a very abbreviated version of this. And then we just look at the pizza and walk through what is happening to the olives. Most come from Spain and they're in trouble. Most tomato sauce from California. There's some issues there. The quality of the nutritional quality of the wheat, the cheese, all kinds of things. What about doing this in dining halls across our campuses? Cornell feeds 27,000 meals a day. I think there's extraordinary opportunities to help tell this story in our dining halls, given everybody eats. A really easy way to do this is sitting down with somebody and asking about their favorite ingredient and doing a search. And 3/4 of the time, you're going to get a climate change story. Some positive, mostly negative. The new course is more comprehensive. It's called Climate Change in Your Future, Basics of Climate Change, how to talk about it, how to confront it, dealing with climate anxiety. Food is interwoven throughout it. The lecture last week was given by someone from Cornell Health to talk about climate anxiety, civic engagement, the role of media, careers, humor. I'm going to have a faculty member come in and he specializes in climate change humor. And he's really good at it. So here's a few entries, and I'll let you read these from the current course. These are, I've taken these from their journal entries, and some of these to me, they're very emotional, but go for it. I'll let you read them. Bear in mind, in this course, we have not yet gotten to the power of food. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. This was extremely well done, thought-provoking, etc. Um, so we do have some time for question and answers and discussion. I will just say, I just put this into the chat, but we will send the recording to everybody. And Mike, if you're comfortable with sharing your presentation, we can do that as well. If you did not register through our system, please put your email in the chat so that we can send you the email with the recording and the presentation. So are there questions or comments for Mike?
So this is Sabrina Fu. I did put my question in the chat, but I can share it verbally if you like.
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for, first of all, Mike, thanks for acknowledging the need for people to feel empowered to take action instead of, feeling the anxiety that many people, especially the young, I mean, you can only imagine what it must like to be young and be confronted with how climate change will affect so much of their lives. So I appreciate that, but I was also wondering, like, in terms of your semester-long class, do you consider like the different audiences? Because to me, this is sort of what you provided was meant for really upper middle class in terms of, the foods that you talked about, and the activities you have, and didn't know if you practice not only the different classes, but different political leanings in terms of, how you would present and connect, right? I mean, one of the terminologies that I definitely push back against using is this thing about belief in climate change and non-believer, mainly because I think it pegs us into different camps rather than, connecting on common ground like you're doing with the food, right? So, anyway, love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, if the focus is on the common ground, that's, as our survey showed, regardless of political affiliation, I don't take political positions at all in the class. One, that's inappropriate for me to do as a faculty member at Cornell. I apologize. I think you asked several questions, and I'm not sure, just if you could repeat a couple specific ones, bear with me.
Yeah, I think mainly I'm just thinking about like what you um what you provide in terms of more effective communication to different audiences with terminology, and whether you practice on just talking about this either with one-on-one or group to different audiences,
Right.
different audiences, different terminology.
I have given maybe 200 talks on climate change and food. In some cases, extremely conservative audiences. And yes, that talk is different than I would do in front of students. But I have enough experience with this that even for a conservative audience, I'll make it clear to them that I served in the Marines during the Vietnam War. And in one case, they broke out into an applause. And I knew they weren't going to throw chairs at me. So that audience, for those kind of audiences, I'm going to tell you a story. You can believe it or not, but I'm giving you the facts. I've talked to high school students, grade school students, religious groups, on and on and on. So yeah, it's the standard line, know your audience. So I was always adjust my talk to the audience. In fact, just before yesterday, I emailed David at the last minute, okay, who's in the audience? So I actually redid my talk this morning, starting at 6 a.m. to better fit this audience. It was more generic.
Sooner.
Yeah, my original talk was a little more generic, so I narrowed it down. Okay, just comment about the Bloody Mary. I mean, that's for an adult audience. I ate that thing and drank it, and then I took a nap. Yes, and it's got meat and all kinds of things. There's comments about kiss the ground. Somebody wanted Sunday? Help me out there. If
Yeah,
not,
sure. I do climate change education in school gardens for younger students, and I use the soil as part of the learning. Most of our food comes from soil, and the current practices in agriculture are hurting soil organisms. So we learn about soil life, the life below our feet. We learn about composting, which is food waste solution. And soil is a huge part of how we learn about climate and food, because soil is where carbon can be sequestered. So I'm suggesting that film as an educational piece for people who would like to learn more about that angle of teaching climate through food.
in some audiences, I will include basically everything you've said about the value of soil. It's in our book, a potential for it to capture enough carbon to almost offset, almost get us back where we need to be, or stabilize the atmosphere. No, it's the skin of the earth, and it's extraordinarily important. I'm going to go to the next one. Did I hear correctly? Genetically modified foods are not a problem. They are not a problem when it comes to human consumption. They are safe. The way they've been implemented is another issue. Early on, well, you're going to repeat the same herbicide over and over on a crop, you're going to get super weeds. Well, we have super weeds. My point was the actual safety in consuming genetically engineered crops. In fact, that someone entered that. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not arguing about pleasures of glyphosate and all that sort of thing. Wait a minute, let me answer that.
So Mike, I guess I wanted to.
Bear with me, but that's
Sure.
separate from the actual genetic engineering of the crop. Okay,
What?
David.
Right. You're gonna have to figure out how to give Dane the key if he goes in with me.
So Mike, let me just ask in terms of when you are um, teaching students and you presented some of the reactions from the students. Have you also done assessments in terms of are students more motivated to act? Are they more motivated to change their behaviors in some way? What kinds of outcomes are you seeing from this? Not from learning to then, as you say, the antidote to despair is action.
One, they, as I showed the list of words they use at the beginning, they're overwhelmed, hopeless, etc. That changed, and the few students that I've kept in touch with basically say, Mike, I continue to tell the story of food, of climate change through food, wherever I am. So the sample size is small, but basically that's the story I'm hearing, that they picked that up. They've got a tool they can use to talk to grandma, to talk to Uncle Roy or whatever it is about climate change. And those that I connect with continue to use it. And let me go back to Sunday's comment that the audience for this is very limited. I don't agree with that at all, unless I'm misunderstanding that. Because again, we all eat. And I made it clear that the audience is the rich world. Clearly, this doesn't apply to a lot of people in this country already food insecure. It's meant for those of us who have the capacity to make a difference. And the feedback I get in general on presentation, all these audiences is usually a surprise, and they realize, wait a minute, I can also use this in my conversations.
So let me, and we're almost out of time, and if people need to go, that's fine. I guess I'll get to you in a second, Gilbert, because I think you're going to get to right what I was going to ask about. But just to say that again, we've recorded this. Mike will share his presentation. We'll email that to everybody. He's also doing another presentation tonight. It'll be basically the same presentation at 8 p.m. Eastern, so at 10 hours from now. So if you have colleagues or other students that you want to have join in, please have them. They do need to register because it's a different link, a different Zoom link than the one this morning. And then next week, as I say, there won't be a speaker, but it'll be, I'll talk about more sort of, I just went in a very general way about how to participate in Climate Education Week. And then we'll have a chance for you to share what you're doing. So and we'll have these continuing every Tuesday at this time through mid-April. So I want to again thank Mike for joining us. Thank all of you who are coming, and I'm going to turn to Gilbert because one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, for people who are in other parts of the world, sort of how does this message, how does this connection between food and climate change resonate? And so I'll turn to my friend Gilbert from Kenya to give us his thoughts and maybe a question as well.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I am very, very interested in the way Professor Mike has taught us. So my first point, I would like to remind him to answer the question that is in the chat, saying that what is a question written by Rachel asking, what about the microplastics we are consuming? So there now, my question is, as you highlighted the meaningful of food, and there is a sentiment to say that there is no love than the love that we have for food. Now, as we all know that we have different backgrounds, okay? And now I decided to go and engage others by highlighting the meaning of food. At the same time, the people I wanted to engage, maybe they start feeling to have that food. They feel to eat. What means or ways do you use to encourage educators so that the guests they can feel comfortable while there is no presence of food? Thank you very much.
Let me answer the first one about microplastics. I mean, that's not a topic I covered. Obviously, they're everywhere, and it's an issue. But I'm sorry, Mr. Gilbert, I didn't quite get. David, can you help me the exact question? I apologize.
I think Gilbert, do you want to repeat that again, please? Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what you're asking.
Pardon, please. My personal question was, as an indicator, you wanted to engage and to educate while you are not able to provide the food so that the guests can feel the meaningful of food.
Okay, so to actually provide food. Well, I mean, this is in a university class, so um, I don't think. But I think that does raise the question or the opportunity that many people in organizing events do use food as an attractant for people to come to events. And I think one of the things that Mike has showed us today is how we can use that food not only to get people to show up, but then to learn about the food that is being provided to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, yeah, we will send Mike's email along with, and actually the way that we do it is, unless you tell us otherwise, we're going to send everybody's email address. We're not going to BCC. We're going to send it to everybody, so that way you do have an opportunity to connect with each other if you want, because we're really not only trying to educate our own students, but to form an educator or form a community about educators. And I'll say, there are a lot of um, topics related to food that are being raised in the chat, from food waste to production means and supply chains and all of that. And Mike, and you can certainly comment on this, but is taking a focus really on let's use food as a way to start thinking about climate change and to recognizing the climate change issue. And, then certainly as people start thinking more about food, then you get to questions about how food is produced and distributed, et cetera. But I don't know, Mike, do you want to comment on that at all?
Oh, absolutely. Because if we are able to keep the foods we need and love on the table, coincidentally, we'll keep the planet livable. That's the point. Because all the actions we need to maintain our food supply, benefit, address climate change is a bigger picture. We have to reduce greenhouse gases. We have to educate people in new ways, and that's a possibility through food. We need to talk about it. That's the first starting point in addressing climate change. So all of those things, there's a role for food in every one of those to address the bigger picture of stabilizing our climate. That's the point. I agree with you. Yes.
Right. Well, Arena, thank you for joining us. I'm not sure where you are joining us from, but unfortunately, I think we got confused on the time zone difference because we've pretty much just ended the presentations and some questions and answers. You can stay on if you have some specific questions. If you put your email in the chat, we can make sure that you get the copy of the recording along with everybody else. And then 10 hours from now, Mike will do a repeat presentation. So um, if you are available and awake during that time, 10 hours from now, you can join us then. Um, are there other questions or comments for Mike?
For the record, I'll be awake at 8 o'clock tonight.
Okay, well, good. I will too.
I love the humor.
They'd have to have some humor in this story.
Really.
Yeah, I mean, as I my dad said before me that it's better to laugh than to cry. It's
The guest lecturer we're bringing in for the class, Aaron Sachs, he's a historian, but I listened to one of his talks one time and I laughed from the beginning to the end. And it was a very, very healthy experience.
good, yep.
Yes.
Does anybody want to share, as long as you're hanging with us, any experiences that you've had in terms of using food to teach about climate change and reactions of the people that you've been teaching and things that you've learned in your experiences?
Well, if you don't mind me, I'm not a teacher.
Please.
Again, I've had a Laudato Si circle it's going on 4 years now, and the whole purpose of it is to educate, reflect, pray for creation, and make actions. And again, I have done all kinds of activities and work within my parish, but this cookbook I'm starting, which Professor Mike, this is such awesome information I'm going to put in this cookbook. The entire parish is interested in the cookbook. So that is, I'm putting all kinds of information I don't know for sure, but they are climate deniers, or at least they're skeptics. But food has subject of food and providing, like you said, it's a nourishment. It's somehow we're sharing with each other. This is just a really good avenue I have found. So thank you.
One of the strongest experiences a student had in the first class, we would go to the dining hall, get a meal and bring it back. And when they had that plate in front of them, several in their journals just said, that was it. I could look at it and I knew all the things that were changing right there on my plate. It sort of brought the whole course together.